I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
This is the first line's main villain of Bioshock 1, Andrew Ryan, ever speaks to you. Admittedly, it is over a recording, but this, combined with the previously seen in the game statue of himself with the words, "No gods or king, only man," really gives you a sense of who he is. This series I'm doing, Visionary Villains, I hope to use it to put a spotlight on some of the best parts of games, movies, TV shows, any type of media really, that being the villains. Now, come with me as we look at what makes Andrew Ryan one of the best villains in fiction. Going back into the speech that Ryan gives at the beginning of the game, as well as into Andrew Ryan's past in general, some cracks start to form that really make him a real villain. Those being his line of, "Is a man not entitled to the sweat on his brow?" But when you look at the history of the man himself and also just the history of Rapture, he did not lift a finger to build Rapture. He paid people to do it, but he never actually worked on building Rapture itself. If what he said in that speech is true, that he believes that everyone is entitled to their own work and the product of their own work, then he should not have any ownership over Rapture. Yet he is the most in control of Rapture. And while some would say that since he was the one who paid the most for this money, for this city under the water, that since he had that money, since he earned that money through hard work and dedication, that he does own Rapture, because he is put his all into building it. But via an audio log in the game, we learn that he had gained access to his money by lucking into an oil well on his property. And this is not the only place we see certain things start to crack, making Andrew Ryan truly a hypocritical monster that makes him so fun to deal with in the games. Now we're going to examine some character relationships. Now, keep in mind, most of the characters in Bioshock aren't actually allies of Andrew Ryan, more or less just additional obstacles for the player to overcome in getting to Andrew Ryan. But there are two major characters that I believe shed a new light on how Andrew Ryan thinks and why he is such an interesting character. The first of which is Atlas. And I really, really hope that you've played Bioshock 1 before, because serious spoilers here, but Andrew Ryan versus Atlas is interesting because Atlas is the former business rival of Andrew Ryan, Frank Fontaine. And Frank Fontaine is a fascinating character in his own right, but in relation to Andrew Ryan, the two of them match wits very, very frequently prior to the Rapture Civil War, making a very interesting, very powerful dynamic between the two without them really ever sharing even a single word of dialogue in Bioshock 1. Frank Fontaine was pretty much becoming more of an owner of Rapture than Andrew Ryan. And when Ryan realized that, he started trying to take down Frank Fontaine from within the bounds of law, trying to find out if there was any dirt he could have on Frank that would allow him to put him in jail, or better yet, just outright kill him. This, however, was manipulated by Frank Fontaine, specifically because he wanted to rule Rapture with an iron fist, but the businessman persona that he was using made that pretty much impossible. He wasn't able to act in a way he needed to. So he allowed Ryan to find some evidence that would lead to Frank Fontaine being labeled a criminal. And in the raid on Fontaine Futuristics, Frank Fontaine's primary company, he faked his own death, becoming Atlas, the revolutionary. A very interesting character for reasons that you discover throughout the game. But in addition to this, Andrew Ryan pretty much tied his own noose by taking control of Fontaine Futuristics, Fontaine Fisheries, and the Little Sister orphanages. Basically making it seem like Andrew Ryan didn't put away a criminal, but rather dealt with his own competition. And eventually, when Atlas started coming around, starting to make himself out to be a revolutionary, hell-bent on helping the downtrodden, and having it in for Andrew Ryan, then Rapture started to fall into a major decline, ending with the Civil War, which Atlas, while he did lose, he had a backup plan. And in the end, he wound up winning the conflict against Andrew Ryan in the long term, even if his victory was short-lived. Thanks to yet another character, the protagonist, Jack, whose full name is actually Jack Ryan, because he is Andrew Ryan's son. You can find an audio log near the end of the game that outright tells you that Andrew Ryan accidentally got someone pregnant. The mother sold the baby to Suchong, Frank Fontaine, and Tenenbaum in order to get some extra cash and make sure that Ryan didn't find out about it. And those three turned him into essentially a bioweapon who was capable of being controlled via the phrase, "Would you kindly?" And this is interesting because when we don't know any of that when Jack is introduced to us via the plane crash and his first foray into Rapture, and thus it's rather interesting due to the fact that we are lacking context that Atlas has, but Andrew Ryan doesn't have that context either. He doesn't know that you are his son, nor does he know that Atlas is actually Frank Fontaine until the final moments of his life, before the famous "Would you kindly" scene, where we see Ryan's hypocrisy in on full display. This hypocrisy being when he uses the "would you kindly" phrase to strip away your own agency, forcing you to kill him. It's unclear why he does this, why he wouldn't just have you go and kill Atlas, or why he wouldn't just tell you to kill yourself since he had the ability to. But regardless of what the reason is, he strips away your free will with the haunting phrase, "A man chooses, a slave obeys," presenting you with a golf club and telling you to kill him, ending his life doing one thing he supposedly could not stand, taking away another's free will. This is fascinating on several levels, since by this point he should know that you are his son, but it's unclear on whether or not that actually affected his decision or not, making a really interesting character that could be talked about for hours. And while I'm not getting into the roots of Andrew Ryan as a character behind the scenes, it should be noted that his basis comes from the book Atlas Shrugged, an objectivist novel penned by Ayn Rand that presents a lot of, interesting moral conundrums presented in a very absolutist way. I recommend reading it if you want some background on Bioshock itself. All of that said, I believe that Andrew Ryan is a fascinating character due to the fact that on the surface, he seems like big evil bad man, super evil capitalist tycoon who doesn't care about anyone but himself. But when you peel back the layers on a lot of his dialogue and appearances throughout the game, and especially his final moments, he becomes a much more fascinating character with a lot of real depth. All of that said, I hope that this sparks a bit more thought on the character himself, and I'd love to know what your thoughts on Andrew Ryan is in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful day.
傷ついて嘘が下手なくせに笑えない笑顔を見せた I love you もろくに